Hey guys, Polkadot has pulled back sharply, and it looks like it has all but invalidated its immediate upside setup, but that is not necessarily bad news. Even if we have a lower low, we actually don't have too much downside left, and we may be setting up for an epic buying opportunity in the bigger picture. So we're going to start with the short-term picture here. This is the 1 hour linear chart, and the action has not been pretty in Polkadot, especially while other cryptos have had 5-wave structures up for leading diagonals. We didn't get that as much in Polkadot. We can actually see we have a clear 1, 2, 3, 4, and we didn't quite get that fit. So a bit of a failure to launch. You can't really count this as a third wave because it's too small. It's better identified as a third. So really, it identifies best as an A, B, and a C, which was basically the primary pattern of the big picture anyway. And well, it's filling out as such as well. We're seeing similar action in Bitcoin and Ethereum, as well as various altcoins in which we have had a sharp pullback along with the equity space. And in the case of cryptos, most of the cryptos have pulled below their lower trend lines. A lot of them had a setup like this. And as I mentioned, some of them, like I think Solana, maybe Chainlink, they had clear 5-wave structures up, but we are not seeing that in Polkadot. But that's not a bad thing because this will at least give us a bit more clarity. So really, our green pattern doesn't technically validate until we break down below this 1579 low that we hit on January 24th. And well, really, we've already come down so far. If this is just an A wave and we're going to have a B wave bounce and a C wave down, it would have to be an unconventional truncated C. So I don't see that as a high possibility at the moment. So really, I'm favoring red, and that's not a bad thing, as we're going to look at our big picture chart just to show where we are here. This chart is available in the description below, so please be sure to check out the link so that you can follow along. I haven't changed too much on this chart, but I have changed the upper projections, which I'm going to go over later in the video, so stay tuned for those. But in our big picture, we do have what looks like, well, at minimum, it's a 1-2-1-2 setup, which is the most bullish setup in Elliott wave theory. And well, if we stretch it, it could be a 1-2-1-2-1-2. 3 degrees of 1-2s that are nested. We're going to look into this bigger picture a bit more in detail in just a second, but our red pattern is primary, which is calling for having this entire pullback being the A wave that ended on July 2021, B wave bounce, and then, well, we expect a C wave down to complete, well, most likely best be identified as a wave 2 overall. But here's where things get a little ambiguous for Polkadot. Polkadot, of course, is higher risk because of the lower history. This chart only goes back to August of 2020. And when we look at this thing, this could still count as 5 waves up. In the 1 wave, that is the alternate green pattern, which would have us pull back no lower than the bottom that we have right here, 1046. So why is there some ambiguity? When we look at this pattern overall, we shouldn't pull back. Well, we don't have too much downside left. Are we falling red or are we falling green? There's no way to know. And there's really not much difference, practically speaking, because if we're following green, we are either done with our pullback already, or we have a little bit lower to go, maybe down to the $14 mark. Maybe it could stretch a bit lower, but it really looks like we have pretty good downside resolution, and this 1-2-1-2 would look best if we just come right down to the bottom support here at 1042, 1045 is what I have written here, 1042. It would be an open debate. Is that the the smaller degree wave 2, or is the bigger degree wave 2? And by Elliott wave standards, because of how high we bounced, we had a flat, an expanded flat. You don't typically see those in second waves. In addition, this does look like a legit 5-wave impulse. The proportions look about right. If we build out our Fibonacci extension tool here, let's do that real quick. Assuming that's the top of the third, build that out here, maybe even down here, whatever it is. We have the top of the first wave hitting the 0.618 extension. So there's a lot of signs that that could be a 1-2. And even if we dipped all the way down to the lower support, it really wouldn't make a difference. I would probably just consider this thing to be the bottom of our green wave 2. So just some small technicalities. Either way, it would preserve our 1-2-1-2 setup. So what are we looking for? If we do break below that support I mentioned earlier at 1580, something like that, very likely we're going red. We're probably going to go well into this zone here below the box. I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit just to show you guys. So somewhere between 1516, all the way down to 1036. And as I mentioned, green doesn't technically invalidate until we break down here 1042. If that happens, then that tells us that this whole thing is just an expanded flat correction for a larger scale wave 2. That's what this red pattern is entailing right here. I'm going to actually expand that thing to make it a bit more visible what this is. So that is the bearish news. The bullish news is that, again, this is a 1-2-1-2 setup, 3 1-2s in a row. What do I mean by that? Well, in Elliott wave theory, you typically have your self-repeating fractal patterns, which look like this. You have your 1, whoops, I don't know what I clicked on there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And within those individual motive waves, each of those will also subdivide into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 patterns. So in this case, if you have a maybe something like this, you have a 1 and a 2, 1, 2, and then this would actually be a larger degree 3, your 4th wave and your 5th wave up. This is what I refer to as the nested setup right here. You have a 1, 2, and then a smaller 1, 2. That is exactly what we are seeing in Polkadot, but not just Polkadot, a couple other cryptos also have this in place, which of course I have other videos that go over, but if nothing else, this is a 1, 2, 1, 2, because we have a pretty standard looking second wave retrace potentially. And then this, of course, we have declared as a impulsive first wave, looks like it, and a correct pullback down. That's a 1-2-1-2. If that's a 1-2-1-2, our next wave up would be the third of a third. So it would be the heart of a third wave. And in this case, the way I drew this doesn't really visualize very well, but the third is the strongest, relatively speaking. So if you have this little pattern here, the third of the third is the strongest part of the strongest larger degree wave. That's what I'm getting at. So that alone is exciting. The other part that I'm going to go over here is the history. Again, short history started in August 2020. This Fibonacci extension here is built purely in a kind of in a theoretical way. As you can see, it's anchored way down here at 42 cents. We don't have any history back there, but I use this rule of thumb. This is often used for IPOs, new stocks that have just been released. I've applied this here for cryptos as well. Oftentimes when you buy in the IPO, you're buying at basically a blow off top of sentiment. That's why you often see IPO stocks crash before they take off again much later. If we assume a standard 61.8% retrace, then our smaller degree first wave just about hit the 0.618, which would mean that we're going to eventually hit the 1.236 extension up ahead, up above. And if we again look at the real data, not the hypothetical, so from this bottom at 272 to this top and back down, that's almost 61%, 61.8% retrace. Maybe we get a little lower if we break that support at 1042, whatever it is. Regardless, if this is a subwave 1, we almost hit the 0.618 there as well. So there's a lot of Fibonacci confluence. And in Fibonacci pinball, all these are pointing at a very powerful pattern long term. This is one of the most bullish patterns we have, if not the best one of them all. The only caveat being that limited history means that, well, it's a little less trustworthy than otherwise would be. So that is something I take into account appropriately. Where does that put us? So if this is really a 1-2-1-2 setup, ignoring the bigger 1-2 here, we are projecting in relatively short order, once this correction ends, to rocket up to 291 to 432, just for the third of the third alone. That would be a colossal return. I'm actually going to do the calculation right here just to see what that would look like if we hit that. Obviously, we need a smaller degree 1-2 to get that going, but that would be a 19-20x return minimum just to hit the third of the third. That would happen relatively quick once the sentiment shifts, because again, we are entering the third of the third for Polkadot, and for Bitcoin and Ethereum, we'd be entering the third of a fifth, which is also often just as powerful as the third of a third. So a lot of bullish action there. And ultimately, our larger degree third wave would hit way up here, 590 to 1175. I would actually be leaning towards higher, and I'm not even going to do the returns calculation on that. It's pretty nuts. If we look at our hypothetical Fibonacci extension tool here, there is confluence up there. It's just mind-blowing how significant the 61.8% retrace number really is. Seems to really stick to that. Very interesting. A lot of fractal action going on here, self-repeating Fibonacci ratios. So that is where we're going. I'm big on Polkadot. So it is time to start thinking about buying. If you're holding Polkadot, probably good to keep holding it. If you're planning to increase your allocation or get it for the first time, get ready to make your plans, because again, we are much closer to the bottom than we are to the top. We're sitting at about 1830 right now. I could see this thing dropping to maybe $10, maybe a little lower. Just depends on where our bottom falls. If we actually hit the 61.8% retrace of this middle degree wave 1, maybe down to 820, something like that. Whatever it is, it's time to buy. It's time to be greedy when others are fearful. And as I mentioned, diversify, especially with Polkadot. I love Polkadot, you love Polkadot, but it's risky. We don't know. I'm calling this a 1-2-1-2-1-2 setup. Who knows? Maybe that's the top of a third wave and we only have so much to go. Maybe it's just a fifth wave up. There's risk here. So diversify, buy a bunch of different altcoins, spread the wealth. You may have something outperform that you didn't expect. So if you want my updates on the developments in cryptos, don't forget to subscribe, as I will have some risk reward ratios and some analysis across the entire crypto sector. And if you enjoyed my video, don't forget to give me a like. Until next time, thank you for watching and happy trading.